SpaceX announced its new mission to the moon. A Japanese billionaire will be the company's first space tourist. What does this trip mean for the science community and future of space discovery? And ROK President Moon Jae-in and DPRK leader Kim Jong-un signed the Pyongyang Joint Declaration on Wednesday. What pledges did they make, and what does it mean for the denuclearization of the entire peninsula? I'm Zhong Shi in for Liu Xin today. Welcome to The Point. SpaceX is sending a man to the moon, but this time a billionaire will be on board the rocket rather than a professional astronaut. Elon Musk's space transport company announced on Monday that Japanese entrepreneur Yusaku Maezawa will be its first space tourist. The Big Falcon rocket, which is still in the development stage, will launch as soon as 2023, and the trip is estimated to take about 4 to 5 days. Maezawa said he is also planning to invite up to 8 artists to join him for the journey, free of charge. His entourage will be the first group of humans to get close to the surface of the moon since NASA's Apollo 17 mission in 1972. What is the significance of this trip from a scientific and business standpoint? What risks are ahead, and how might private tourism companies transform space, the so-called last frontier? I'm happy to be joined in the Beijing studio by Professor Yuguang from the China Aerospace Science and Industry Group. And from The Hague in the Netherlands, we have Dr. Giuseppe Reibaldi, President of the Moon Village Association. Gentlemen, welcome to The Point. Let me start with you, Professor Yang, here in the studio. We've actually been talking about space tourism for some time now, so it's not exactly entirely unimaginable to send someone to the moon, but it wasn't until this first paying passenger has agreed to a trip like SpaceX is offering that we realize this really could happen, according to SpaceX's estimates, a handful of years. What was your reaction when you first heard of the announcement?
Well, my first action is that it will be a really tough task for SpaceX. You see, one thing SpaceX is correct, because space tourism is a very hopeful field for manned space flight. It is one of the few fields that can be profitable and have direct return for the manned space flight, although manned space flight is very meaningful. But for SpaceX, I think maybe the tourism, the journey to the low Earth orbit will be much more practical because it's more easier and less risky. But for the trip to the moon, because they need a bigger rocket like the BFR, originally they have the plan to use the Falcon Heavy. Well, both BFR and the Falcon Heavy have the problem that they use too much engines on the first stage. The Falcon Heavy used 27 engines on the first stage, and the BFR will use more Raptor engines on the first stage. Using so much engines on the first stage will be very, very dangerous, and it will cause the interaction between different engines, and the vibration will be very crucial. The former Soviet Union performed 4 launches with a rocket which have 30 engines on the first stage, but all failed. So you see, although the Falcon Heavy, the first maiden launch, is a successful one, but that does not mean that they have already mastered this technology. Moreover, the Dragon spaceship is still not a human-rated spacecraft. So in the future, they should test their Dragon spaceship, and also to keep the reliability, ensure the reliability of the Falcon rocket family.
Okay, it looks like you're more concerned than excited about this prospect. We'll talk a lot more about the Big Falcon rocket in just a few minutes, but hold that thought. Dr. Reibaldi, you are president of the Moon Village Association, which, and I quote, fosters cooperation for existing or planned global moon exploration programs, be they public or private initiatives. Do you share these concerns of Professor Yang here in our Beijing studio, or are you more excited about what this could mean for space exploration?
Well, first of all, I have to say I'm extremely excited, like I think many people around the world. The realism and the practical implementation is something else, and we might talk later. The excitement is that the announcement explained to the public that the moon is not very far, and even if this announcement is a publicity stunt, as we will discuss later, is very exciting, and people needs to be excited, as the moon is going to be the subject of many missions, with the Chinese mission, Israeli mission. So it's going to be very common in the next few months and years. And so I think it's very important that the people realize that. And so it's exciting because people can think that in the future themselves or their children can travel to the moon in a not too distant future. That's the way I see it. And for the association, as you asked me, I think since we are trying to have as a platform to help different parties, stakeholders all over the world to cooperate, this is also an important sign that also commercial will play a major role in the moon exploration.
I think it's extremely important and interesting that we now have a time, 2023, where this could happen. It's not certain that this will happen in 2023, as we will discuss later, but having an exact year there certainly keeps people very interested and teased in this prospect. Professor Young, let's talk about the big Falcon rocket. SpaceX, of course, has tremendous experience and success with its current fleet of the Falcon rockets, but this will be a big upgrade from what SpaceX has and has been doing, and it's essentially going to be two parts. We're going to have a booster, which you talked about, rely on Raptor engines, a lot of them, and then we're going to have that spaceship that will actually carry all these people to the moon. Talk to us about this rocket that is now under development.
Well, originally, Elon Musk released this idea during the International Astronautical Congress in Guadalajara, Mexico in 2016. He released the idea, the topic is to make human beings a species of interplanetary species. His idea is to use the big Falcon rocket as a transportation system between the Earth and Mars. The first version of the BFR used about 42 engines on the first stage, and the second stage is also act as the spaceship for the cargoes and for the passengers. And for the passengers to go to the Mars, he needs the cargo ship to refueling the ship for passengers many times, and then go to Mars. And he has a very strong assumption that there must be a base on the Martian surface, and also there are on-site utilization facilities to refuel the what you mentioned, the spaceship, and then go back to the Earth. So in this way, he can quickly reduce the cost. His idea is very good, but there are still many problems and many technical challenges. And on that day, there are some audience asked the questions: how to deal with the space environment questions and other life support problems and other safety issues. He cannot answer that.
And given the complicated and sophisticated development of this rocket, do you think 5 years is enough for SpaceX to come up with an operational big Falcon rocket to succeed in this mission?
I can 100% confirm that it's impossible for SpaceX to complete this mission within 5 years, because you see, the Falcon Heavy is much easier and much simpler than the big Falcon rocket. Even though originally the SpaceX announced that the maiden flight will be in 2013. But you can see only in recent months it just achieved this goal to have the first flight of the Falcon Heavy. The Falcon Heavy only used 3 similar boosters like the first stage of Falcon 9 to enhance the capability of the rocket. Well, the big Falcon rocket will be much complex because the diameter will be 12 meters. It's much larger than all the rockets in history. The processing and the design of this rocket, the fuel tanks and the stage itself will be a great challenge for SpaceX. The human being has never done that before. And also, as I mentioned, using so much engines is a great challenge. Originally, the success of Saturn V is because the NASA performed many ground tests to test to find the problems. But SpaceX, it seems obviously don't have a similar plan. So I'm doubt about how they can ensure the BFR can be a human-rated launch vehicle in the future.
And Dr. Reibaldi, we're not trying to be a wet blanket here, but a lot hinges on the successful operation of this rocket. Your take on its practicality?
Well, I think we need to understand the message coming out of the announcement. And I always try to go beyond what is the actual news. I think the announcement which has been made must not be taken on the face value. I think the announcement, the way I see it, is that Mr. Musk is basically telling the world that he's serious about development of BFR, the big Falcon spaceship, as they call it now, and because he has got few extra money coming from a private passenger. So I think this is the very first message. At the moment, there has been speculation about starting the development of BFS. With this announcement, he has a mission. Okay, so that is the first important message. The second important message is that the moon is our next destination, and so is a place where commercial operation will take place. And so basically, these are the kind of messages. As far as on the actual practical implementation, obviously I share what Professor Yuguang said. The practicality and the feasibility in the time schedule, which has been explained, it is certainly not feasible. But as we always have learned from Mr. Musk's announcement, there is some truth in his announcement, but obviously these are more from the point of view of indication as a goal. So I don't think we should take this 2023 anywhere serious. As I said, It is mainly a message that we move forward.
That's good to know. And talking about inspiration and messages, I want to talk to you both about our first tourist, Yusaku Maezawa. He's a Japanese entrepreneur who made his fortune in e-commerce. He's worth an estimated $2.9 billion and has become an art collector. So essentially, we're not just sending some rich guy into space. We're sending a guy with a vision, with a dream, with a profound love for art, and believes in the power of a moon exploration trip in terms of inspiring artists. What do you think of this passenger?
Well, I think almost every people have a dream to visit Moon or visit Mars. When I attend some conferences on international space field, the Director General of the ESA, Mr. Jan Warner, let us to raise our hand. Who wants to go to Mars? Everybody raised his hand. Who wants to go to the moon? Everybody raised his hand. So it's our dream, but until now, it's only a game of billionaires. But I think this is a very good start. Good start. Although we doubt about the technical challenges which can be solved whether or not by SpaceX, but we should encourage these kind of activities. And only when we have more private companies and other people can join in this field, we can bring more technical innovation in this field. And only with the technical innovation, we can maybe someday reduce the cost and common people can afford it.
And gentlemen, we're running out of time here. This is no longer a hypothetical situation we're talking about here, but I do want to end this part with a hypothetical question. Dr. Reibaldi, let me start with you. If you were invited, would you go?
Well, I think this was a question which was made to Musk, and he himself took a bit of a time to reply. So personally, I will not consider to go in the short term, maybe in the next 15 years or so. I think we need to get the system proven and in a way that is really affordable from a physical condition point of view. As far as the issue concerning the vision, I just want to comment that is the excellent news that artists are really planning to go, because artists are at the root of the public and they can really bring a message of peace and positive message to all humankind.
I think that's something you share with this brave passenger. A message is crucial to people's understanding of the moon and the limitlessness of what people can do here. Professor Yang, how about you? You mentioned how people all raise their hands to go to Mars. Would you go to the moon if you were invited?
Well, my dream is to go to the fourth moon of Jupiter, Callisto. because I often, I often take pictures of Jupiter in my home. I found I have the chance to take pictures more closer to the Jupiter.
All right, I want to thank you two gentlemen for your input into our discussion today. Professor Yang Yuguang here in our Beijing studio, and Dr. Reibaldi, thank you so much for your insight. You're watching
welcome.
The Point. We'll be right back. Also on The Point today, on the second day of their historic summit, Republic of Korea's President Moon Jae-in and Democratic People's Republic of Korea's leader Kim Jong-un reached a wide range of agreements in the Pyongyang Joint Declaration. In broad terms, this declaration covers the denuclearization of the Korean peninsula, improvement in inter-Korean relations, and military-related agreements to ease tension. The two leaders see this progress as a sign for ushering in a new era of peace and prosperity. When briefing the summit, ROK Senior Secretary to the President, Yoon Young-chan, said, and I quote, "Through the declaration, the two leaders have declared a practical end to the Korean War, going beyond the armistice, which was signed in 1953 and has lasted until now over the past 65 years. Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump hailed the inter-Korean talk on Twitter, describing it as very exciting. So what kind of a picture are we looking at on the peninsula, and how close are the DPRK and the U.S. to a second round of talks? Joining me for discussion here in the studio, Professor Su Hao from the China Foreign Affairs University. And from Washington, D.C., we have Dr. Ivan Eland, Senior Fellow at the Independent Institute and Director of the Independent Institute Center on Peace and Liberty. Welcome, gentlemen, to The Point today. Let me start with you, Mr. Su, here in the studio. Quite some encouraging achievements coming out of the talks this time, chief among which a practical end to the Korean War. In your opinion, how significant is this end, and is it somewhat less legitimate without the presence of China and the United States? Mr. Su?
Yes. Well, actually, this is great progress for this kind of the peace process over the Korean Peninsula. Actually, I would say that, in this kind of declaration, joint declaration, so both sides have the great commitment that they will promote denuclearization, complete denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula. So that will be the laid good condition or the foundation even for the next step for the peace building over the Korean Peninsula. We know that in the past, the Korean War still there after the end of, after the ceasefire of the war between the North and the South. But it's just a temporary or illegal way to stop the war between the both sides. So both sides need the legal framework, even the peace treaty, to define their ceasefire or even to stop the war between the both sides. So there will be absolute framework to maintain the long-term or lasting peace over the North and South Korea, and even in the whole of Northeast Asia.
And Mr. Eland, improving inter-Korean ties was high on the agenda for President Moon Jae-in as he set foot in DPRK, the first South Korean president to do so in more than a decade. Did he get what he wanted? And is Washington content with what has been achieved, first among which an end to the war?
Well, I think he's right that the two Koreas should do more to settle their own differences. And I think it also gives President Trump an excuse to have a second summit with Kim, which I think he really wants to do. But his national security people are telling him, well, we have to get more concessions from North Korea before we can do that. But I think this sort of helps with that because the North Koreans have agreed to close a missile test facility and a launch pad, and also perhaps if the U.S. reciprocates, close the nuclear fissile material facility, which is central to their nuclear program. Now, of course, this is not a promise for complete denuclearization, because North Korea already likely has weapons in being, etc. So what will happen to those, we don't know. And I'm a bit skeptical that North Korea will ever give those up, but it's certainly progress, and I don't think you know, if the alternative is very tense relations, which we had before, or even war, this is good. And I think it's good that the two Koreas are making progress.
Gentlemen, talking about progress and pledges from Pyongyang, including permanently dismantle a missile engine test facility and a test launch site in Cheoncheon-ri, which is a key test center for the country's intercontinental ballistic missile program, and more importantly, allowing inspectors to the site to witness the progress. Is this big enough a gesture for Washington in order to push things forward from where they are right now, Mr. Su?
Well, I think that the nuclear issue is a real key problem between North Korea and the United States. But I think that in the concrete points, to make North Korea careful about the North Korea is that North Korea has their, ICBM, I mean, it's intercontinental missiles, launching against the United States soil. So that make United States feels careful, even feels the threat directly from United States, from the North Korea. So I would say that on the one hand, the United States try to push the North Korea denuclearized, but on the other hand, I would say that the United States much more focused on their dismantles of North Korea's nuclear and even the missiles capacity building. So this time, North Korea have the promise to dismantle their launches missile site. That would be make the concrete steps for the United States that North Korea already have the very clear and even the very stick, promise, even the actions to follow the Americans' needs for the next step of denuclearization. So I think these are very serious steps taken by the North Korea.
Mr. Eland, is it serious enough for Washington to maybe reconsider what's going to happen next?
Well, like I say, I think may give Trump an excuse to go against his national security advisors and create another summit, because with Mr. Kim, simply because he can say, well, he seems serious, he's promising to get rid of this missile facility and launch pad, and he might even get rid of his fissile material facilities if we make a reciprocal steps. But I think his advisors really want to see an inventory of North Korean weapons, facilities, fissile material, and some sort of a plan to start getting rid of them. So they want Trump's advisors really want to see a long-term plan to denuclearize. This really doesn't denuclearize it. It's a step towards that, and it certainly is a concession. And I think it's a concession to get the talks going between the U.S. and North Korea again. We'll see if the Trump administration, which is sort of has conflicts between the national security advisors and the president himself. We'll see if they can work out their differences, and whether this will be enough to get another summit started.
If we look at the timing of these talks, both leaders, of course, seem to be in very high spirits, very confident and optimistic about the future of the peninsula. But they're meeting at a time when really denuclearization of the DPRK has hit an impasse. Obviously, Pyongyang and Washington want very different things, and neither is prepared to budge, even with the concessions from Pyongyang this time. Like Mr. Eland says, President Trump's advisors might still want more from Pyongyang to verify what has been going on in the DPRK. But if we look at the root of the problem here, it's a different perception of what counts as denuclearization, and someone has to move in order for this process to continue. And even if that second summit happens between Kim and Trump, something else needs to be done. Some acknowledgement might have to be given to Pyongyang for the commitment it has put up so far. And what will that look like going forward, Mr. Su?
Well, I think that there's always the format between North Korea and the United States regarding the denuclearization issues. I mean, that is action to action. So this is their, so far North Korea already takes some kind of concrete and essential step to move towards the denuclearization. For example, they also dismantled their testing of nuclear weapons in the past, And now they also dismantles their testing site for the engine and the missile. So that is the second step. So by this way, I would say that the United States should be taking the next step in response to the North Korea step by this way. So that we action to action. And after the North Korea gets the response from the United States, we're going to give something to the North Korea. So make the North Korea do the next step for the denuclearization. So I think that's at the moment we're looking for the United States to take the reciprocal action in response to the North Korea's behavior of dismantles their engines and launching test site.
We don't have a lot of time left, but I want to talk to you both about Moon Jae-in. He's the middleman here. He's been made the mediator between Pyongyang and Washington. Mr. Eland, your take on how he's been doing so far, and will inter-Korean ties improve after this particular summit?
Well, I think in the short term, yes, they will. It depends on if Moon can drag the U.S. into this, and he's certainly trying. I have to give him credit for that. I mean, he's taking the initiative and pushing, he's trying to push the U.S. and North Korea back together, and of course that's key because U.S. is South Korea's principal ally and provides the nuclear shield over South Korea. And so there really has to be U.S. agreement, and I would also say China's agreement to officially end the war. Now, the United States, as to your previous question, what could the United States do? One of the things that they could do is maybe have some sort of a declaration that hostilities were attenuated or even ended, but without formally entering the war, because ending the war. I think that what North Korea would really like is for the U.S. to withdraw its forces from South Korea, but you'd have to have an ironclad denuclearization of North Korea, and also inspections before that could happen.
Dr. Eland in Washington, D.C., and Mr. Su in our Beijing studio, I want to thank you so much for your time here. And that wraps up today's point. I'm Zhongshi in Beijing. Thank you so much for watching.